G'day guys, my name is Wildkard, welcome back to my channel. Thank you for watching my content. It's Tuesday, it's a news day. Let's take a look at what's been happening in the world of rugby. Rassie Erasmus, he's back at talking about rugby, talking about England rugby, Six Nations in particular. He wrote a column in the Daily Mail in UK. Looks like he's moving towards the path of Sir Clive Woodward, treading on his territory. And he's basically talking about his thoughts on some of the things. He did some of the key stuff that came out of this article. Basically, he talked about how the Springboks was in the position that England is right now, that England's rebuilding when he took over in 2018, where they had a pretty shocking year in 2018. They lost to Australia, and I think they lost the first time to Argentina in 2018 as well. Dreadful year for the Springboks, but you know, they built the team from there going forward to win the World Cup the year after in 2019. And he basically talked about England is in the same position right now, and there's so much rubbish that Eddie Jones had to deal with. He's probably finding it a little bit too much to deal with for Eddie Jones. So he's kind of like swinging on the fence, kind of like batting for Eddie Jones a little bit here. And he said he mentioned in particular, you know, Eddie Jones has to deal with the board, deal with the crowd. Clive Woodward, he singled him out, someone who's been pretty critical on Eddie Jones' performance. And the media, that's 60% of the work done. So he really talks about how like some of these things could be distracting for a coach. Personally, for himself, he would prefer not to deal with any of these sort of stuff. He would just focus on dealing with people who knows and talks about rugby, and leave someone else to deal with all these politics and stuff. But Eddie Jones seems to be on the front line when it comes to dealing with stuff, and he did think that this is, you know, could affect Eddie Jones' work a little bit. He also mentioned that there's a lot of criticism. He kind of like backed Eddie Jones in the selection here as well. There's a lot of criticism. Eddie Jones should be replaced. He basically saying Eddie Jones has always been a good coach. There's no reason for him to not suddenly become a bad coach. He will be, like he said, similar to a situation the Springboks has been in 2018, that he thinks that Eddie Jones is on track to be good at the Rugby World Cup next year. So there you go, pretty high praise from the most popular man in South Africa. Rassie Erasmus has been talking about Eddie Jones. And also big news in the weekend, Moana Pasifika won their first historical win in Super Rugby. This win came before the Highlanders were able to win their first game of the season. And the Highlanders still haven't won a game in Super Rugby in 2022. Yet Moana Pasifika was able to squeeze out the first win against the Hurricanes. The Hurricanes had I thought it was a pretty untidy game. A lot of uncharacteristic errors. You know, big names like Beauden Barrett was making just stupid mistakes left and right, missing his conversions, missing his penalty touch finders, just various amateurish style mistakes that was leaking out of the Hurricanes. Eventually, the brilliance of the Moana Pasifika reserve came on, and Danny Toala basically scored a try from like 60 meters out. He kind of did his kick and chase, and then probably not 60. This was like 75 basically, kick and chase, and to seal the game in the Golden Point. So it was a draw 1919, and then in extra time they were able to beat the Hurricanes. Quite impressive. Huge win the weekend. Also moved to the Blues now. The other Barrett, Beauden, was concussed once again. He had 41 minutes on the field this game. This was his first return to the starting number 10 position, and he has been out for pretty much the entire season, except for like 1 week. He came on off the bench for about 20 minutes. So he's been out for most of the season due to, firstly, concussion from the international season last year. Kind of like missed out the first couple of weeks. Also COVID. He got COVID in the last few weeks as well. So he missed out a couple of weeks there due to COVID. And finally he's back, and immediately he gets himself knocked out in the first minute in the second half. So he played 40 minutes, 41 minutes. I thought his overall performance was a bit average, looked a bit rusty. It's understandable. He hasn't played for a while. Obviously, the team has built a lot of, plays and, structure without him. So he's kind of like have to work himself back into the structure of the team. So I thought his performance was pretty average. Some brilliance here and there. But the main thing I thought was really disappointing, because I do really like watching Beauden play, is the concussion. This was the game that I looked forward to the most on the weekend. And now that I'm not going to be watching the Blues anymore. I will watch, but I'm not going to be enjoying it nearly as much without Beauden, to be honest. So big loss. But good news is he's been cleared of concussion symptoms, but he will still not be able to play for at least 2 matches due to the concussion protocol. So yeah. And then also in the Super Rugby for the Brumbies versus the Western Force game, there was a big controversial start. The Brumbies beat the Western Force by 1 point. This was a really close game, kind of entertaining game as well. A lot of points being scored. There was a point where the Brumbies were pretty much dominating the first half, the first bit of, I don't even first half, like the first quarter of the game, before there was a penalty try given to Tom Banks, kind of like head clashing with one of the Western Force player, and got red carded and getting issued a penalty try. And then the sanctions came out. Essentially, Tom Banks was in fact that head clash collision. It was kind of like a shoulder to shoulder and a bump, and then head just like whiplash into each other. The decision came out of the Sansa is that this was only a yellow card and it should not be a red card initially, but the player should be taken off for HIA anyway, which happened, and so he's not gonna be receiving a match ban, but he did apparently have a fractured face. So yeah, he's not gonna be playing for a while, Tom Banks. So really unfortunate. Tom Banks, once again, I thought was the best player for the Brumbies in the season by far. So missing out the best player for the next who knows how long, right? Second red card was issued between the Reds and the Waratahs game. Zander, the loose head prop for the Reds, was given a red card for shoulder charge to a player on the face. This one was cited as a red card level offense, and he's banned for 3 weeks. So yeah. And then, as a result of that red card, Dan Keller came out and mentioned that there should be an orange card being introduced. I thought this is quite stupid, but basically he's saying that there should be, instances like accidental stuff that's currently given as a red card, like the head collision, should be given an orange card, 20 minutes. But he thinks that there should be another level up where it's clear cynical foul, like, if someone wants to throw a punch, for instance, that should still be a red card and be banned for the rest of the game. So she thinks that there should be another level up, and he thinks that maybe an orange card should be something in between. I feel like he does have a point that if a player cynically like punches somebody or eye gouges somebody or something like that, they should be playing with 14 players for the remainder of the game. So maybe I think he has a point here, but I do think that, as far as in the current state of the game, the professional era, it's pretty rare for people to kind of throw a punch nowadays. But maybe it's kind of like a moot point. But yeah. Anyway, next one. Maybe instead of having an orange card, have like a special thing where like a fight does occur. For example, like instead of you still have red and yellow at 20-minute red cards, but have like a special, like, I don't know, not a card, but just like a outright ban for like throwing a punch, for instance, right? Maybe something like that. I don't really want to complicate the game too much with too many different color cards. That's kind of like my opinion here. For the Waratahs, they lost the game on the weekend to the Reds. Despite the Reds was down to 13 players, the Waratahs really struggled to put points on the board. They had a pretty good start in the weekend, but then kind of like the consistency wasn't there, and then eventually faltering to the Reds when they had the full team back onto the field. So the Waratahs desperately needs a bit of a kick into the team. So Michael Hooper is set to return for Super Rugby. He has a contracted resting period after the international season last year, and he's set to return on the 1st of April to play against Fijian Honduras. So this will be good to watch. Hooper has been the best player for the Wallabies last year by a long shot. So yeah, good to see him back. Now for the New Zealand side, the Chiefs lost a big grudge match against the Crusaders on the weekend. The Crusaders lost to the Chiefs in the first meeting between the two teams, surprisingly, and was kind of like under the pump in the second half for the most part of it to lose that game. So the Crusaders came out of this game with a pretty like repackaged team with more kind of like punching power on the field. Scott Barry returned, Seven Reese came out, and yeah, really put the Chiefs, you know, back into their place. There was some talks about the Chiefs being the new Crusaders last week after beating Moana Pasifika with their like, you know, second team. And then basically this week, the Crusaders showed who is the dominant force, beating the Chiefs quite convincingly, 34-19. So yeah, this was disappointing for the Chiefs fans. The Blues, like I mentioned, beat the Hurricanes on the weekend. Beat the Highlanders on the weekend in Dunedin. This was a really fun game to watch in the afternoon sun with Zoo back, crowd back. This was a lot of fun to watch, and yeah, with Beauden as well on the field. But the Blues were able to fight off the Hurricanes. Fight off the Highlanders. The Highlanders did look like they could potentially had an opportunity to make a comeback in the second half, and it was looking like there could be another choking disaster for the Blues. And then Hurricanes managed to, the Blues were able to kind of like stabilize the situation and find themselves in a couple of tries towards the end to seal off the game. And then, yeah, like I mentioned, the Waratahs lost the Reds despite having the Reds being in the 2 players in the bin. Yeah, really needed a bit of a boost to the Waratahs team. Having a good start of the season to kind of like miss out this win against the Reds was a little bit of a disappointment, especially the advantage that was given to them for 20 minutes was really squandered that opportunity there for the Waratahs. The Fijian Honduras played the Melbourne Rebels on the weekend. This was a game where the Rebels, much better performance by the Rebels. Matt Tuamura was put back into 10 position, and he really managed the game quite well, basically steering the ship nice and steady for the win. Honduras did look like was trying to make a comeback in the second half of the, once again scoring like 2 or 3 tries in about 10 minutes in the second half, but eventually was not able to close out the game, and the Rebels steadied the ship and find themselves on the winning side of this match. Also along the weekend we saw the starting debut for the international Jamie Roberts from the former Welsh international, former Lions. Oh, Jamie Roberts. But I saw him to play at number 12 for the Waratahs on the weekend. It was quite entertaining to watch. And then Brodie Retallick for the Chiefs was injured on the weekend with a broken thumb. Not sure how long he's going to be out for, but hopefully not that long, because Brodie Retallick is a huge player for the All Blacks as well, not just for the Chiefs. Hopefully he'll be okay. I mean, a broken thumb, I can't imagine that taking him out for too long. He might take a few weeks off and see how he goes, but yeah, still a bit nasty. Having the thumb, being able to work the thumb as a lock is kind of like, it's kind of like, yeah, like he's one of the most important part of his body for a lock. So quite unfortunate for Brodie Retallick. Also, there's been some more talks of Israel Folau returning to the Tongan team. He's qualified for the Tongan selections for 2023 Rugby World Cup. He had a pretty stellar performance on the weekend against the Sunturos, The Shining Arcs against the Suntory Sungoliath with Damien McKenzie. There was a nice try where he challenged McKenzie under the high ball and scores a try. He is like a foot taller than McKenzie, so not surprised he beat him to that catch. But yeah, it was quite impressive. So if we get a quick look here, maybe we can get a quick look without the sound. Yeah, but see, McKenzie had to sweep across the field to cover this one, but yeah, wasn't able to get that. But yeah, this was good talks about Izzy Folau coming back. I was really mad at Izzy when he did what he did for Rugby Australia, but I'm happy for him to make a comeback, to be honest. I think everybody deserves to forgiveness, and we'll see how he goes for Tonga. And then, obviously, talking about Rugby World Cup 2023, we're talking about last week, Spain qualified for the Rugby World Cup, and then immediately they are under investigation for eligibility breach. So Spain has had multiple incidences of eligibility breaches in the past. In 2019, they were disqualified due to eligibility breach for a number of their players, and they were not able to make it to the Rugby World Cup. I think, in fact, that's the reason Russia made it to the Rugby World Cup in 2019. And then in 2020, they were investigated again for playing a player called John Vessel Bell, a South African winger, and they were looking for documentations for his residency rules, and they could not find any, essentially. And then finally, so at the moment, there's another investigation in its current team. This was reported by Romania. So we'll have to see the results in this. We'll have to keep a close eye on this. But they had a history of playing players that are not eligible to play for Spain. So we have to see how this one turns out. If they are caught once again breaching the eligibility law, we could see them getting kicked out of the competition once again for 2023 Rugby World Cup. So the RFU for England has already begun the work to look for a new head coach to replace Eddie Jones after 2023. Obviously, following a lot of public, I guess, I wouldn't say anger, public lack of support for Eddie Jones, they have built a internal war room to looking into the succession plan for Eddie Jones, and then there's overwhelming support for an English-based performer for the replacement. So an Englishman is most likely replacement. So I guess Warren Gatland and Rassie Erasmus will be out of the picture. So they will be looking at someone for the English club to replace him. And I guess that's also a way to keep what's his name? Clive Woodward mouth shut, right? So Woodward seems to be really hating having this international coaches looking out for England, because he does feel like they don't own the team. He has talked about that in the past. So maybe that's where they're going at. But yeah, the RFU is set up for a replacement. Andy Farrell's son, Owen Farrell, returned for the Saracens on the weekend for a nice win over the Bristol Bears, 27-23, where he kicked 12 points. So good to see. Owen has been out for quite a while, and he missed out the entire Six Nations. A quite important man for the Eddie Jones game plan as well. So having Owen back healthy is a pretty big return for the England team and England rugby overall. I probably don't want to talk about this too much. It was like a video that the United Rugby Championship released about people getting knocked out or something. Don't really want to talk about this too much, but whatever. But more importantly, I'll talk about this one. The Thomas Francis incident versus England. So Thomas Francis versus England, he was putting onto the field. Basically, he looked like he was hurt. He got concussed. He was taken off for HIA, and then he was cleared to come back onto the field. So there was a bit of an investigation for that incident, why he was allowed to come back onto the field. So they basically had a look at the footage and they basically assessed that whoever decided he was allowed to get returned onto the field made an incorrect decision, but they would not be pursuing disciplinary action against those involved in the incident. So yeah, the Six Nations and World Rugby has basically stated that there's a little bit of a unprofessional conduct, to say the least, occurred during this match, where Thomas Francis was allowed to come back on after a clear injury to the head. But the people who are involved in this conspiracy is not going to be facing disciplinary action. So yeah, they are going to look at kind of tidy up this sort of things to make sure that it doesn't happen anymore in the future. But yeah, I mean, this is a little bit of unprofessional, to say the least, for the thing. Quick words: Sonny Williams came out with a boxing fight against Barry Hall. All I wanted to say about this is that Sonny Williams looked like he can still play rugby. He he's such a good shape. I mean, my God, he smoked Barrett Hall. In case you didn't watch, he maybe we can watch it. We can see, and he's only like what 36 or something, 37. I mean, Alan Wynne-Jones still playing. Come on, and Sonny Bill Williams look like he's in much better shape than Alan Wynne-Jones. So, and we know, Mornay Stein's still playing. So maybe maybe someone can make a big offer and get Sonny Bill Williams back onto the rugby field. That's kind of like what I want to get out of this one. Also, there's some talks about the Rugby World Cup in 2031 being played in the USA. And there's like a bit of investment going to USA as well, like $500 million for the USA to host the 2031 Rugby World Cup and 2033 Women's Rugby World Cup. So yeah, this will be pretty big for United States, as this is a huge market for rugby. And if they can develop the game in the US further with the growth of the rugby, what do they call it? In the rugby, what do they call it? Rugby. What is it? What do they call it? I can't even remember. What is it? Professional League Rugby? Premier League Rugby? Is that what they're called? I can't remember what they're called. Anyway, with the growing of the club rugby in the USA as well, this could be a big market, big opportunity for them to like finally break into the market and put a stamp onto the United States for the growth of rugby. This would be really, really huge, I think. And finally, this is a bit of opinion. Suliasi Vinivalu, a ex-rugby league player, currently contracted with the Reds. Basically some talks about him going back to rugby league, and there's a lot of people talking about that he should stay in rugby union to play the Rugby World Cup. Basically, Lote Tuqiri came out and said that he should stay and play the Rugby World Cup for the Wallabies before making a decision to leave rugby union. I thought if he doesn't want to play rugby, you should just let him go. There's no reason for people to get locked up in a position they don't want to be. I mean, it's not good for the Wallabies to have him in the team if he doesn't want to be there for the Rugby World Cup. It's not for him to be playing rugby union if he doesn't want to play rugby union. I think he doesn't. So Tuqiri basically says he owes rugby union. He doesn't owe rugby union anything. I mean, he has never been selected to play Wallaby. I mean, I think he was selected for the squad. He never played for the Wallabies. He doesn't owe rugby anything. He needs to do what's best interest for himself and what he wants to do for his own career more than anything else. So that's the news for the week, guys. Thank you for watching this content. I really do appreciate your comments. Like, comment, and subscribe, yada yada yada. And thanks for watching. I'll see you guys later this week for the reviews. Cheers.